Sounds good. Hello, everyone again. My name is Marilyn Algishik. I am the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Indigenous Nurses Association. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's session. I would ask that the participants keep their microphone and camera off. In the chat box, you will be provided an opportunity to insert a question or a comment during this presentation. However, we have also reserved the last 40 minutes of today's presentation, this webinar, when we go back into the entire group at the end of the evening before we go into the closing. We will be recording this session for future viewing, and this link will be sent out along with today's evaluation survey. It is now my honor and privilege to introduce you to Goswanta Kevin Deere to do our presentation and webinar for this evening. Nyago.
All right, thank you very much. So what you see here and depicted in front of you is a quick visual of our creation story. So I'm going to be talking and saying some Mohawk words, and I'm going to relate it to various pictures that I'm going to show you to try to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. What is depicted here on my language is called Izi Nutkaru Hyadi. It means the other side of the blue. So if you look, you see blue, and that represents the sky. But if you go on the opposite or the end of that, you come to what we call Izi Nutkaru Hyadi. Now at that place, who are there? So in our language, we say Karuhyage Ronu, and it means that they're sky beings or sky people. So now in this place, it's similar to this lower world, just that there's none of the things that we experience here with regard to pain or suffering or what have you. There's a chief, there's like spirit beings, and all of the things that are here in this physical world are there. The chief is having a feast. All of the things are there. The stars, the moon, the suns, the plants, the animals, the birds, everything except the wind spirit. Now the name of this chief, his name is called Rorundade, and it means he's the guardian of that great tree. Now this chief is having a dream. And in order for this dream to be fulfilled, someone has to guess it. Anyways, it's a long story. I'm only going to take you, I'm going to just through the highlights of it. Anyways, he decides he wants to get married. He asks this the mother of this young girl if he could marry her. She agrees. Conception takes place, not the way it happens through here. It happens as a result of a sacred fire and co-mingling between two spirits. And then what happens is the dream says once it got guessed that that tree would have to be uprooted. And when they're sitting next to the tree with his wife and they're eating cornbread and what have you, or traditional foods, in order for this whole dream now to fulfill, she has to leave that place and come to this lower world. So it says that he pushes her. When I first heard that, I thought, I don't know if that's a real good way to depict it. But if you just imagine your own birth story for a minute. You're in this upper world known as the womb. You're growing in there in darkness. There's things that we don't fully understand about what's happening with the cell development and all of that. But when the time is right, the first thing that happens is your mother's water breaks. When your mother's water breaks, then you, that little beautiful baby, follow that path and hey, look around, we're welcomed into this physical world. But the contractions had to start and we are actually pushed. So now what happens in this picture, you're seeing Sky Woman who's carrying a child that is conceived up there because two women laid a foundation to life. And what does she do? She follows the water. And then what happens is now we get into the next picture. And then now you see that the Sky Woman is there on a turtle island. And then what she does is she tries to replicate that place to the best of her ability. She brings some of the seeds of life down with her, and even she's carrying a daughter, so that's another life. And then she begins to sing sacred songs. And as she begins to sing those sacred songs, that turtle begins to magically grow. And then she asks some animals if they can assist her. So what happens is the otter, the beaver, and a muskrat attempt to bring up some soil, and the muskrat is successful. So she takes that soil, she takes those seeds, and she starts to sing. And in our longhouses, in our ceremonies, we say that some of those sacred songs that she sung are some of the songs that we even sing today. And as she was falling down, it says even the birds intercepted and helped her with her fall. So anyway, she lays out the foundation to life. And then she's visited by a spirit. And the spirit lays 2 arrows next to her body. And again, as a result of that, she magically conceives. And then when she conceives, there are these 2 twins that are developing within her womb. And now these 2 twins, one of them is going to become our creator. The other one is his brother. But these 2 twins are in constant interplay, because whatever Darunyawagu, which means he's the holder of the heaven, does, his brother tries to mimic it, and then sometimes he does, like, he tries to undermine or do the opposite of his brother. Anyway, these 2 twins go on and they lay out everything in this physical world. Finally, they come to a contest that is going to determine who's going to rule day and who would rule night. And Darunyawagu, who's the holder of the heavens or the creator, overpowers his brother. And Darunyawagu says, my power will be in the brightness of the day. And you, my brother, your power will be in the dark night. Now, for some reason in this story, our grandmother, she decided that she favored the left-handed twin for some reason. So Darunyawagu, the creator, takes the head of grandma and he places it in the nighttime sky. And he says to Grandma Moon, he says, well, no, he says, every 28 days, you're going to shine your face on my brother, the grandson that you favored so much. When the time came of their birth, Sawiskara, who's the left-handed twin, caused their mother's demise. And as a result of that, it says she dies. So when they bury her, so then it says that there are gifts that came from her body. From her brain came the sacred tobacco. From her heart grew the strawberry. From her navel came the corn, beans, and came the squashes. From her fingertips, the beans. From her toes, the potatoes. So that tells a beautiful story about these things that we need that come into our life. Anyway, so now we have these 2 twins, these 2 brothers. And as I said, it's the interplay between the 2. So now when you understand our story, it's not God versus the devil, how from the old country, they create all of this fear. This is the interplay. When we come to this world now, we got to understand that, because we can be put out of balance. And when we're put out of balance, there's ceremony that we have to do to right the mind. And it can either be because of going too much to the right or too much to the left, but we always have to understand that and put that into a perspective. So anyways, that talks about that interplay. So now, when Darunyawagu, who means that he's holding up the sky, makes our people, he takes the clay, and what he does, he molds these shapes of these clay dolls. And it says that he takes 3 sacred breaths and blows into these 3 dolls, and then they became our first ancestors. And as they began to look around, and they had already some language, because they were given language, they were already able to start then to identify and knew the names of some of these things. But the creator also said that as you're going to move along, look to the animals, because the animals are going to teach you. And we have so many stories of how the animals taught our ancestors. When Darunyawagu makes these beings, he takes the clay of the earth and he shapes them. And those our people that understand our language, when I ask you in Mohawk language and I ask you Onizatarodon, some people think, well, I just asked you, what is your clan? But it has nothing to do with clan. Dara is clay. And when I ask you Onizatarodo, I'm asking you, what clay are you made of? Because we all come from the clay from the body of our earth mother. And then now, when you ask me who I am, you say to me, Unkaniza, I will respond, Gungwehunwe Ni'i. What does that mean? Ungwe means because of this, we are either male or female. Unwe comes from the word Zinawe, which means forever. So because we come from Izinut Karuyadi, the other side of the sky, and who's there? Garuyagerono, that's the sky people. So now that sky people, that energy, I'm the part of that sacred energy that now comes into this body to give my spirit expression. So Ungwe Hungwe, when we understand that, our spirit is forever, but comes in this body for a little bit of time as clay in order to give this body expression. The story goes on, and those ancestors were all great and happy and all of that because they didn't know what death was. Anyway, all of a sudden, one day people started falling. They didn't know what that was all about. And people's minds really got all shooken up when finally there was a little girl that ended up dying. And all through history, our people were never forsaken. When there was something that created all of this distress in the minds of the people, it either happened through a messenger, through dreams, even the animals would come and they would help our people to restore that mind, to give them that sense of peace and to make sense out of all of the confusion. So it says there was a man, his name was Rayandaris. That means that he is kind of like well-knowing. There's a lot of things that he knows. And it says that the Great Spirit came to him in a dream and told him that what's going to happen. Remember when I told you about the interplay between the two and the night? So we call it Wasunda Watgoa, means the big night, that he's going to come at our feet and he's going to cause us to trip and he's going to take our spirit back to where we originate. So it says, never be afraid, because this is how it is. When we come to this world, we have a stick, and on that stick, there's marks, and all those marks represent one night. So Wasunda. Tewasundage, Asaniwasundage, Askadawat Yawan Wasundage. 1 night, 2 nights, 100 nights, 1,000 nights. And some are not even going to make 1 night because they came here just for a little time, they visit, and then they went back home. But all of us, and it's already, nobody knows how much we have. And when our time is up, it's up. There's no woulda, shoulda, coulda. I know sometimes maybe we think, well, if I could have done this, this person would still be alive. But what it says in this teaching is when your time is up, as much as we don't want to accept it, never have any guilt and never have any fear, because for us, there's no sin, there's no burning, there's no hell. We come from this place and we're going back to this place. So anyway, Ungwe Hungwe, spirit with this walking earth, and that's forever. Karuyageronu, the spirit ancestor beings. Then Izinut Karuyadi, the other side of the sky. So just in our language, when you understand what's in our language, man, I was so happy when I started to learn my language and pick these things up, because I said to myself, wow, what a whole big release, freeing of the mind. Because when I was raised, I wasn't raised with these teachings. My mother baptized me when I was 3 months old. I went through my first communion. I went through confirmation. I was an altar boy. I did all of that stuff. And you know what? That's a good story. Nothing wrong with that story. But what I say is it's not my story, and I wanted to know what my story was. So when I went back and I picked up my own creation story, my own language, our own sacred sounds, ceremonies, rituals, speeches, I said to myself, wow, how great it is to be alive. Because in our original instructions, when our ancestors were made and they were stood up and they were given their language, and they were given natural law. I mean, aspects to understand natural law. They were given sacred instructions. Well, some of the things that were you seen was that Thanksgiving address, because it's stated in the oral tradition that when our ancestors look around, they were told that all these things are gifts. And the only thing that you have to do is to have an attitude of gratitude every day. And then it talks about when the ceremonies started to come. What are ceremonies all about? Well, today we have ceremonies for our life supporters, our corn, our beans, our squash. We have ceremony to acknowledge our elder brother's son. We have ceremony to acknowledge our grandmother, the moon. We have ceremony and dances to acknowledge our grandfather, the thunder beings. We have ceremony to acknowledge the plants and the medicines and the different societies that we still belong to. So when we look at the richness of all of this stuff, what it says to our people is it says that if you want well-being, understand these stories, relate to these stories, be grateful every day, have peace of mind, put these things into a perspective, sing, dance, be happy. And the only other thing that you have to be mindful of is the future generations. So that when you look to the unborn nation that are not here yet, you think 7 generations ahead, so that when they will be born, that they too will inherit a safe, clean, beautiful, peaceful, healthy home. And that's our responsibility to them. So when we go back to our creation story and we put this all together, I said to myself, wow, man, this paints such a beautiful picture. And I'm so glad that I can, talk about it and share it so that hopefully people can come from this place where they can feel good about themselves. That there's no story that's hanging over their head that in some way, shape, or form tells them that they should feel less than. No, we come to this world, our spirit is whole, it comes from the Great Spirit. It comes into this body for a short period of time to give our spirit expression. And when we come here, only thing that we do is we love this body. We treat this body well. We don't contaminate it with alcohol or cigarettes or drugs or any of these different kinds of stuff that we know that is going to harm this sacred gift. There's people that think that they have dominion over the earth or they have dominion over this and that. We have dominion over nothing. But if we want to say we have dominion over something, the only thing that you have dominion of or over is your body. Your kids don't belong to you. Your wife doesn't belong to you. The things that you're going to acquire in this life don't belong to you. You came in this world with this gift of body, and that's the only thing that you can truly say that is yours. So what's your relationship with this body? Do you treat it well? Do you love it? Do you try to take care of it in the best way that you can? Because we look to that sun as our elder brother. You look at each day, that's a birthday. That sun, when it comes up over the horizon, you see a little crescent, then you see half of it, then you see 3/4 of it, then you see the whole roundness of that. Look at a little baby, when a little baby's coming through the birth canal, it's the same almost process that we go through. Then we come into this world. The sun comes up, it reaches a midway point, then it's starting to set. And when I look in the mirror, heck, I'm starting to set. My hair is turning white. My face is starting to crease up. And you know what? I'm 100% good with that because I came out of the womb of my earth mother and I'm going back into the womb of my earth mother. When I die one day, tomorrow that sun is going to rise up again and my children, my daughters, my grandchildren, and life goes on. And so it is with us. We are going to resurrect up again. Our elder brother teaches this teaching every day, but not in the physical, but in the spiritual. Because then we, the Longhouse people, go back to Isinut Karuyadi, the other side of the blue, to where who's there? Karuyageronu, the sky people, Zinawe, forever. And I'm a oguhunwe that has this spirit that comes into this body for this little while to give this spirit expression. So when you look at all of that, it's like, holy heck, why do we ever fear? Well, we know that the answer is, and hopefully with the story that I'm sharing will eliminate that from your mind, because we need to feel good every day. We need to be happy every day. We have to understand the interplay of day and night, and it has nothing to do with evil. It just says that when we come to this place, that there's the interplay of these two spirits. We have to acknowledge the two, put them into a perspective, and then try to walk that good red road in peace, harmony, and balance as much as possible. So now, the other thing that I'm going to talk about now is, so now let's talk about family for a minute. So when we talk about family in English, we'll say, well, my mother, my father, my grandmother, my grandfather, my brothers, my sisters, my nieces, my nephews. That's all family in English. But in my own language, if I ask you, who is your family? Let's take that apart. Now, what we call family is kahwadzire. The root word of that is odzire. What is odzire? Well, like you've seen in that picture, there's smoke rising, and then you see the heat, then you see the wood. Where that wood is being consumed by the fire, it's orange, bright red with yellow. That bright red, where those red hot coals are, is odzire. So when we talk about gahwadzire, we're talking about that sacred fire that burns within each and every one of us. And then one day that fire is going to leave. And just like when that wood finishes and it gets consumed by the fire, it returns back to ash. And so it is with us. But then our fire returns back to that great fire, that light. You look at the earth, they say there's a ball of fire in the center of the earth. You look at the sun, they say it's a ball of fire. You look at the stars, they say stars is fire. We say we come from the star people because star people, or if we say Izinut Karuyade, Karuyage Ronu, we're talking about those spirit beings, and we're talking about this sacred fire. So again, there's another way in our language that helps to paint this idea about how beautiful we are. That we come to this place to make this place more beautiful, to celebrate life, to be grateful to all of these things that we still have. You know, the sacred breath that we take every second of our life, that fresh water that we could still drink, all of that power that is in that water, and then all of those fish. And then the power of that water makes everything grow. And as I said in our creation story, Sky Woman leaves that place because it says that her husband pushed her, and then she follows the water to this place. When we are conceived and we're in utero, our mother's water breaks, the contraction starts, and we are literally pushed from that womb through the birth canal to this world. So when I look at the Iroquois creation story, when I look at these teachings, that's not just a myth. That's not just a fable. For me, it makes it real because it says, wow, I can relate to that. So anyway, we're talking now about the about Akwadzire, our sacred fire that is burning within each and every one of us. Now that brings us to the next word that you always hear people talk about a lot of times. So in English, you say love. In our Mohawk language, we call it Ganoru Kwatsara. And in our Mohawk language, the way it is, it's very descriptive because nouns and verbs are incorporated. So when we say Ganoru Kwatsara, the root word of that is Ganoru. Ganoru. So if it's raining outside, I would say Yogonoru. Why do our people say well, Yogonoru? Because they understand that water is precious. Because without water, there is no life. When the Europeans came here and they introduced us to money That idea was concept. We didn't even know how to relate to that. But they tried to get us to buy into this idea and to try to understand it. And they were trying to make us think that this money is something that is precious or worthwhile. So because they went crazy over it with gold and silver and all of these kinds of things, that how it made them act. So then our people said, well, I guess the only way we could try to understand that in our own language, and you can still see the root of it today. So if I go to the store and there's a Mohawk a merchant selling wares or something like that, and I see a nice pair of moccasins that I want to buy. So I will say to that person selling their wares, I would say, Doni Ganoru, Ganoru. What's its preciousness? But then people say, well, how much does it cost? See, in our language and when you English and you're trying to make the connection, sometimes it just doesn't really do it justice. So now I'm trying to paint this idea. When we talk about Ganoru Kwatsara, we're talking about this preciousness that has ties even to the water. And how precious is water? And now when we're talking about our families, and we're talking and we say Gunarunkwa, it's saying and it's trying to convey that you're precious to me. So if something is precious to you, how do you treat that? Well, I know some people have some stuff that is precious and they put it up where nobody can touch it and they don't want fingerprints on it and all of that. But that's a thing. Imagine if we fully understood Ganarum Kwatsara and how we understood that, no, we're precious. And because we're so precious, how we're supposed to love and treat everybody. But because of all of these things that have happened to us with Christianity, with the residential schools, with loss of our lands and our loss of our spirituality, loss of a way of life. Even when I was a kid growing up, there was people that knew the language, but they didn't have the culture. So, there's ideas that I heard when I was a little kid, and it says that if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. So when we were kids, my dad, when they were kids, and I don't know how far back it goes, but they were always strapped. Kids were always put out the side. They were never made to feel like, hey, Zayat Danoru, you're precious. And because you're precious, your spirit, when you were a little baby and we welcomed you into the world, you needed to be, almost like put up there because you were this child, this baby, you were this sacred gift that came to us. Because of all of the things that we went through, we did all those things of maybe sometimes it was intentional, sometimes it was unintentional, where we scarred and we wounded our kids because we were scarred and we were wounded. And the old expression goes, hurt people hurt people. But anyway, all of these things that we are now reeling from. And what we are doing is we are going back and we are empowering ourselves. We're empowering ourselves with our languages. We're empowering ourselves with our own sacred songs, dances, ceremonies, rituals, speeches. We're empowering ourselves with our own creation stories, because in our creation stories here on this Turtle Island, we are all right from the start when our ancestors were first made flawless. We were given everything that we needed to be happy, to be healthy, to be everything. And the only thing that was asked for us in return is to always have this attitude of gratitude and to express it in joy. So now here we are, we're in this time, we're in COVID. And here's what I say about what the Earth Mother is trying to teach us. Because of capitalism, because of monetary system, because of the ruling elites and because of the multinational corporations where money comes before people, profits. Profits are what come first before nature, before people, because of greed, because people are not well. So now we're suffering all of this stuff. The earth is suffering, people are suffering. We continue to plumage the earth to bring up all of these fossil fuels and all of these different kinds of stuff. We're putting it in landfill sites, and now these things are coming back home to roost. Now we have an opportunity where we better stop and we better start asking ourselves, what are the things that we could start to do different? Not only for ourselves, but those future generations. So now some of you may know Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell talks about the hero journey, which is a departure, fulfillment, and return. A lot of great heroes and heroines have done that. From Black Elk to Crazy Horse, to Jesus, to the Buddha, but it's simply departure, fulfillment, and return. And when you go into this departure, you go and you fast, you give up food, you give up water, you give up everything. You go and you go into this inward journey. Who am I? Where do I come from? Why am I here? What happens to me when I die? And I say that Earth Mother is forcing us into a vision quest where all of us have to do that inward journey and ask ourselves these questions and come to terms with all of that. Because as much as we think that the answers are out there, equally answers are in here. People think God, Jesus, the Buddha, the peacemaker, all of those things are outside of our body. But when you fully understand it, it's all within our body too. And if people understood this, all the wars, all the rapes, all the killing, all the stealing stops, because now you see the sacredness and the interconnectedness of all things. So nature is telling us now, we're at this crossroads, all of the native prophecies are fulfilling. So we better stop now. And like we have in our condolence ceremony, together, we all have to start to see different. We all have to start to hear different. We all have to start to speak different. And together, we better start doing different and write a different story. Because the stories that we have, for the most part, are not working, because if they did, then we would still know that this entire earth is the Garden of Eden and nobody has a right to destroy it or subdue it, because this is a gift that was given to us. I'm going to end with one final thing. Because we're in COVID, a lot of us now have to deal with death. I had to deal with death this coming summer will be 6 years ago when I lost my dad. Now, because we changed our whole lives around, I have a daughter that's 41 years old. Now, when I talked about loving this body, I wasn't always that way. When I was 18, I fell in the trap of everybody else, of cigarettes and smoking and carrying on and doing all of that stuff. But three things happened starting in 1978, the death of my grandpa, in 1979, the conception and and then the birth of my daughter. And then there was a teacher that came here to Ganoru, and his name was Tom Porter. So those three things changed my life. And then I impacted on my dad, our family, and all of that. And I made a commitment when I was a 7-year-old boy. I said, if I ever become a parent, my kids will never, ever see me touch one drop of alcohol, smoke cigarettes, do drugs, be violent. And it's 41 years now that I've been walking this path. So we all changed. We went back into our culture, traditions, longhouse, all of this kinds of stuff, and we're solid. My dad ended up having a heart attack, and when he did, I called some of the people from Goswanta, one of the chiefs, one of the leading faith keepers. We did ceremony at his bedtime. My dad came out of that. He lasted 8 more months. 4 months after his heart attack, I went to sleep at my parents' place. And when I got up, my dad had already had coffee on. He said, son, I want to tell you something. He said, if something ever happens to me again, he says, I don't want to be resuscitated. Let me go back home. I said, okay, Dad, put that in writing. So we did. So anyway, so what happens is when the day that he's going to die, I didn't know that he was going to end up dying, but The hospital called, I went there, we got in the ambulance with him, we went to Montreal General, they did tests and all of that. My last big conversation with my dad was, he said, son, what time is it? I said, it's 8 o'clock. He says, well, come on, let's go now. I said, well, let's just wait for the results. Anyway, he was kind of impatient, he wanted to go home now, and I kind of talked him out of it. It was about 20 after 9 or thereabouts. All of a sudden, I saw his eyes go back and all of that, and he started going into cardiac arrest. And the doctor was filling out paperwork because we're still in the triage. Anyway, he was going to get the defibrillator and zap him. And I put my hand out and I told the doctor, I said, nope. I said, let him go, let him die. And the doctor gave me this perplexing look like, hey, I saved lives and you're telling me to let him die. I said, let him go. Anyway, so he monitored his heart and then he pronounced him deceased at 9:29. And as my dad was going through that process of transitioning, I was holding his hand, I was talking to him in Mohawk, helping him to transition now into the spirit realm. Anyways, when he pronounced him deceased, I just held his body and be with him for a little while, called my parents different ones. So we came to the hospital, we stayed with his body until it got cold, till about 2 o'clock. We go back to my parents' place, and I'm cousins, and my mom had 12 siblings. I come from a real big family. Anyway, people are coming to the house and all of that. And my dad died on that August 17. It was hot that day. Sitting in the kitchen, I said, I'm going to sit on the front porch. I go sit on the front porch, and I had time to just kind of relax by myself a little bit. And then my partner came up to me and she says, hey, what kind of bird is that on the line? Now keep this in mind because this is going to be a central theme, bird on the line. I look and it's a mourning dove. So I say, mourning dove. Well, I said, how come there's only one? Well, I said, I guess my mom's going to be by herself now. So that reminds me of another story that happened in June of 1999. My dad came visit me. He's coming up the back steps. I go and open a door for him, give him a hug and a kiss and tell him that I love him. And this close is how close my clothesline was. And this little fledgling robin comes land on my clothesline. And I said, Dad, I said, this little bird is acting a little peculiar. I said, this bird is a messenger. So watch this, we're going to get a message. I start making coffee and all of that. All of a sudden, we're sitting there drinking, the telephone rings. I pick it up and it's Tom Porter. Tom Porter says, Kevin, I need a favor. I says, yeah. I says, what? He says, you know, our good friend Ward. I said, yeah. He says, I just got word that his 3-year-old daughter died. He said, there's no way I can help out with the funeral, the burial. He says, can you go and help Ward out? I says, yeah, absolutely. Give me the address. So I had a 5-hour drive from here to just outside of Albany, New York. So I went and I took care of that. So second story, bird on the line. As I was sitting there on my dad's porch the day of his death, and I'm thinking about all of this stuff, all of a sudden I start feeling guilty. Because I was thinking to myself, I said, you know what? I let my dad die. And even though that was his wish, I told the doctor, let him die. So I'm struggling with that. And then the tears started to well up and I felt that tightness in my throat and I had this knot in my stomach and I closed my eyes. And I went to a little meditative state. I said, Dad, between me and you, father and son, we know there's no such thing as death. You are now in the ancestral realm, in that great sky world council. You can traverse the spiritual to the physical, back and forth, just like this, anytime you want. I said, if there's any way you can hear me and you can communicate with me and you can give me some kind of sign to appease my mind. I said, wow, I said, that would be great. I said, if I open up my eyes and there's nothing there, well, you know what? That's okay too. Because the life expectancy of a typical Canadian, not to say that I'm a Canadian, but a typical Canadian is 77, I'm 57. So I got 20 years left and I'm going to join you in the Sky World Council. I was thinking to myself, I said, imagine if I open my eyes and my dad gives me some kind of sign. I open my eyes and I'm like, what the heck? I said, Debbie, where's my camera? I said, get my camera, hurry up. She said, what? Never mind. I said, get my camera. I said, I got to get a picture of this. So now I'm going to show you this picture. So now, how can I go to share screen? Where am I? Stop share screen. Let me go back here to share screen. Okay, so now my dad's name is Fred. Our last name is Deer. And this whole story started with bird on the line. So the bird flew away, but the message comes in the form of the clouds. If you look here in the clouds, there's a letter F. Right beside the F, here is a bird. You can see its head, its neck, and here's the body of the bird. And then when you look in the bird, there's a letter D right here. Fred, Deer, bird on the line. Well, the bird flew away. And I thought to myself, wow, because just like that, then all of that guilt and all of that thing that I was feeling went away. And I said, this is a beautiful story. It's my story, but I'll share that story because I know sometimes we need something, a sign of some sort to make us feel good, to know that when our loved ones leave us, that it's not the end all be all, that we go someplace. And when I was suffering with this, I asked for a sign from my dad. And I believe that when I opened my eyes and that FD and the bird was there, that I received this sign. So I'm sharing these stories with you to empower you, to make you feel good that whatever is going on in your life, all you gotta do is change your attitude. Come from this place of your own spiritual reserves because the Creator, the Great Spirit, Jesus, the Buddha, Allah is within yourself. And if you can connect with that inward journey, then you can pick yourself up and it doesn't matter. You become fearless. You don't fear death. You don't fear dying. You don't fear no devil. Anything of this stuff that says you should be fearful, it all vanishes and you take every day as a gift because no one's guaranteed tomorrow. But I know without a doubt that as sure as the sun rises and the sun sets, and even my dad giving me this message that I'm going back home, isn't it karuyade, tinua tadidaru, ne radiruyage eronu, that I'm going to leave this place and I go back to the ancestral realm. So with that, my time is up. I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity to share. And I just hope that whatever I was able to share with you at this time made you feel good and that you feel good. So with that, hamba hibaya, hamba hasha, yo yanere, yo yanere. Thank you very much.
Nyago. So to the people in this particular session, I see that most of you have been watching the chat box, so most of you have been very involved in the presentation provided by Kevin. And we're, like Kevin said, we're in a strange time. And the teachings are time also. 3 times during the session, I got kicked out at very probably key moments of the message Ken was delivering, which obviously I was not privileged to hear.
Yeah, and you keep cutting out right now.
I've had the honor to sat with Paul Skanks, Tim Porter, a lot of the multiples that Kevin has. One of the things I think that I want to be able to just be able to discuss with this group and to open up your
We can't hear a word you're saying. You keep cutting right out.
I think that she might have gotten kicked out, so we'll just see if she can just come right back in. But in the meantime, if anybody has any questions, you can type that in the chat box and we can answer those.
Sorry about that, everyone. So I was kicked out again.
That's
I'm
okay.
hoping you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Um,
Maybe just keep
sorry?
your video. Maybe
Great,
just keep
thanks.
your video off. It might help with the connection.
Thanks a lot. So with that, I'd like to just pose a couple of questions towards the group. Lots of you probably are the first time in the Haudenosaunee teachings. And so one of the things as most of you are healthcare workers or RNs, how should you practice or acknowledge the people of the region to where you're working in? You may not be in the territory of the Haudenosaunee people. Be in the area of people. You may be in an area that is not a teaching that you hear tonight. What should your approach be? Would you go about to ensure that you're recognizing of the region that you're working in, a way of life, to the blend of Western and traditional practice? In the second part, can you, as non-Indigenous people, be carriers of the medicines that Kevin spoke of? Can you participate in the women's teachings of the strawberry in June? Can you participate in ceremonies where there are men present, or are there separate teachings for male and female? And finally, you've heard the word several times this evening. Who are the Haudenosaunee? Who is that group? I open it up to some questions that are coming in. How does the Nursing Association incorporate traditional teachings and medicines in the birthing process? Right now, as far as the Canadian Indigenous nurses, we are working closely with the Canadian Association of Midwives and the National Aboriginal Council of Midwives to restoring that birthing practice, to returning birthing closer to home, to keeping our traditional ways of birthing, so that all of the family can be involved in the water process, the naming process, to having the kind of supports that the young mother, the mother and the father need. Could you please put your questions into the chat? So if you could, yeah, if anybody would like to put their questions into the chat. I know that Andrea, our RNAO IT person, has kept a recording of this, so we will try to make sure that everybody is keeping those questions. So maybe Kevin, if you could tell us, who are the Haudenosaunee?
So initially there are the Mohawks, the Oneidas, the Onondagas, the Cayugas, and Senecas. Then as a result of termination policies in the United States, the Trail of Tears, the Tuscaroras, they became the Six Nations around 1722 to come under the protection of the Great Tree of Peace. So now we call ourselves the Six Nations.
So that's where that's the people who combine the Haudenosaunee.
Yeah, so and then as I said, so then we call ourselves the Longhouse people because that's our belief system.
I'm just being told it might turn better if I turn my camera off. Okay, so I'll turn that off and see if it works better. In order to really look at enhancing our personal, the well-being of our healthcare workers, can they participate in the ceremonies of our people? Do they have to be invited? What should they do to prepare if they were to participate?
Well, it depends because not all ceremonies are open to the general public or to non-native people. So usually what happens if you're not Longhouse, then you kind of you know, align yourself or your buddy with people that will invite you and then take you there. I know like there are different things that people can go to, like powwows and all of that, where and they still have an opportunity to see dance. They have an opportunity to mingle with people. And what that should do to them is just to help them to, you know, to create alliances with us, because all of us are in a relationship. Every so-called Canadian or American and the foreign governments that are on our land are in a relationship with the indigenous people. And we call it in our language Goswanta. And Goswanta means that it's well, we don't really know the interpretation of it, but some people know we refer and we'll say Degani Deohahade. And it means two roads. So one is with the canoe and one is the big ship with sails. And then we're connected by this covenant chain, a relationship that we're supposed to polish to keep that friendship, that peace, and that respect in order. But we all know what happened. It's out of balance right now. But now we're in the time that I say of the indigenous spiritual resurrection, because this indigenous sacred knowledge is resurrecting up now, because it never had an opportunity for people to respect it, to understand it, because it was thought to be uncouth, the work of the devil, and all of that kinds of stuff. So we're in a relationship. So the best way that we could be, share peace with each other, to respect one another, to understand that there are certain natural laws that we need to adhere to while we're visiting this place and on this turtle island. And let's just show love to each other. Let's be good to each other. And let's understand that this history that we've been fed is flawed. And we have to rewrite the history of coming from this place of Ganoru, meaning that we should all understand that we are all precious. So yeah, so go to powwows, you know, and identify with people there, and then ask those people, you know, so help me to understand, what does it mean then to be a First Nation? What does it mean to be a Longhouse? What does it mean? And then they should share enough that those people, like tonight, with all the indigenous knowledge and teachings that I shared, there should be people right now that are just full. Their hearts and their minds should be so glad, because it says, wow, I never heard this story before, and how refreshing it is to know how precious I am.
When the healthcare workers are trying to understand, they're trying to incorporate that traditional or the cultural knowledge as part of their scope of work, a lot are struggling with, they don't know, you know, what is that thing that's hanging around their neck, a medicine bundle? Do I have the right to remove it? What happens if I don't? Do I, you know, can I remove it? It's how do they understand? And I guess they need to be able to work with the people within your region about understanding what are the medicines of the people, what is an understanding of the medicines of the people from that area, so that the way it's becoming much more favorable for the healthcare worker to have an understanding about that traditional practice, or those traditional approaches, to be combined with Western medicines, where First Nations people especially may be blending those two worlds. I see that. Sorry, Kevin. Yep.
I was just going to say, when it comes to people's medicine bundles, that's their sacred bundle. Like everything else, that's with all due respect, you ask that person first if you could touch it, if you could handle it. Because it's just like if somebody comes into your house and right away they want to go walk in your bedroom. How do you feel? You're kind of like going to feel like violated, like, why did you do that? So if you're not sure, if you're in doubt, then don't. You know, ask, get clarification, because that'll always go a long way, you know, to, as I said, to maintain that relationship, that preciousness that we're trying to. And I see there's one question. So how does this help? How does a good mind help us to maintain a good body? Well, a good mind says that we're not going to act on impure thoughts and things that we know that are going to put us out of balance. So it all starts then with those thoughts, and thoughts that are negative, we don't act on them. Then it says, all right, how are we treating our body? Then from there, it says, what's our relationship with the people that we come in contact with? How do we relate to the world? And then who am I? And when you put all of those things together, Gatniguriyo, that good mind, then helps you with the thinking and the thought processes so you can be the best human being that you could be. Because that's what it says. Hungwe hungwe. We're a spirit that occupies this walking clay for a period of time, but while we're here, what are we doing then to promote the love, the peace, and all those good things that everybody wants as a human family?
With that in mind, Nyaga, Kevin, thank you for your sharing tonight.
Okay, so we go back
And
to
so
the,
now we go back to the main room, everybody, to the main session that you came into. This will lead the session. Andrea, thanks a lot.
okay.
No problem. The link is also in the chat box, just in case you guys don't have the email that you had originally.
Thank you.
I go in that same one too, eh?
Yeah, yeah.